Hello, welcome to Global Lens. I'm Parikshit Luthra. In today's edition of the program, we take a deep dive into the India-China relationship, which has undergone a recalibration after being severely strained due to the Galwan clashes in 2020. From taking steps to de-escalate tensions along the border to calling for resumption of direct flights, the relationship is moving forward with a new normal. After deliberations, the civil aviation authorities on both sides have cleared the decks for operations to resume. This comes just weeks after Prime Minister Modi's visit to China for the SCO summit. The direct flights are set to resume from the end of October after a 5-year suspension. This resumption will follow the winter schedule and is expected to enhance air connectivity, support people-to-people exchanges and contribute to the strengthening of economic collaboration between the two nations. This is the word coming in from the Ministry of External Affairs in India. Meanwhile, the Indian carrier Indigo has announced that it will resume services to China beginning 26th of October. The airline will operate daily non-stop flights between Kolkata and Guangzhou, subject to regulatory approvals. Before the suspension in FY19, over 8 lakh passengers travelled between the two countries. This move towards normalization is seen as a positive sign for both economies, which are already reeling under US President Trump's tariff policies. Joining us now to take this forward is Christopher Beder of Gavical Dragonomics. Christopher, thank you very much for joining us. Till 2019, there were 539 direct flights between the two countries. How do you think the air connectivity between the two nations is going to take off now? And what will be the actual quantum of flight exchanges or connectivity between the two countries, possibly by the end of this year?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it all depends on basically policymakers and regulators on both sides. So I think that the demand is clearly there. It's going to be more than in 2019, simply as a function of the fact that both economies have grown substantially since 2019. That said, I mean, obviously the barrier here is the governments on both sides. We're sort of at least starting to move back to something like normal after 5 years of a very, I mean, we're coming off a very low base, essentially, in terms of India-China relations. You take a step back and you think about it, you have the two largest countries in Asia, combined about 2.8 billion people, and there has been no direct flights between the two countries for 5 years. So we're just now, first starting to make the baby steps towards something more like normal. I think we have a long way to go. And how long it takes to reach there, it could take many months, but that's fundamentally a question for regulators.
Right. What I would also like to ask you, Christopher, is that what does this indicate to investors about the India-China relationship? This has to be seen in the backdrop of business visas being issued by the two countries, border trade resuming. Also, there are some positive statements as far as release of rare earth magnets are concerned. Tunnel boring machine goes, specialty fertilizers, but I'll come to that in just a bit. How do you see, especially this connectivity factor when you view the larger India-China relationship right now?
Yeah, I think the message that goes out to businesses is that at least we're starting to move back towards normalcy. I think that the expectations among the companies and investors that we talk to, I would say, is already very subdued. Again, this has been going on for quite some time. And the attention to now has been on various ways that the relationship might actually deteriorate in terms of, as you mentioned, the rare earths, other factors of the relationship that are still heavily restricted in terms of such as Chinese investment into India. So I think the expectations among business is, again, it's still pretty restrained at this point, but you do hear whispers of optimism from the SCO summit that we saw a month ago to this development. There is a sense that things are at least starting to move in the right direction.
Right. What I would also like to ask you, that while we see these baby steps towards normalizing ties, there is also other aspects of the relationship which are moving slowly. About 2 months ago, there were reports that China has started easing up supplies of rare earth magnets. But when we speak to top executives in the Indian automotive industry, they say it's still status quo. They're not getting the magnets, the high rare earth magnets that they really want. What does this really mean? Is China holding up leverage till the time they see more positive indications from India?
So in rare earths in particular, we've seen this sort of mixed messages coming from Beijing to other countries, including India, including Europe, and many other places, where it's sort of this message that goes out that this is not intentional, that we, the Chinese government, are actually targeting the Americans. We are putting in place a new regime of export controls, and due to bureaucratic delays with approvals, this is nothing to really worry about. We're not actually going out of our way to target you. This is just sort of a bureaucratic mishap, and we'll get it sorted. But then there's also occasionally it's mixed in with this other message that this might not be totally a bureaucratic mishap, or at the very minimum, it could underscore the fact that we have leverage over your economy. And I think that's really where the minds of a lot of foreign policymakers, whether it's again from Europe to India, where that's really focused is on the fact that they would like to do more business with China in a lot of cases, that it would be great to see in at some level more normalization of commercial ties between India and China. But there's always this latent sort of insecurity that it could be used, that Beijing is not afraid to necessarily weaponize a lot of its supply chains, and it could potentially use that as leverage in future negotiations. So I think it remains a real concern in the relationship today.
Right. What I would also like to ask you, what do you think will actually take for both countries to normalize relations? The reason why I ask that, because there are quarters in the government, there are some sections of the government which believe that the relationship can never become absolutely normal. There is, of course, a baggage of the conflict that had happened between India and China in 2020 that cannot be forgotten. But at the most, we can go back to how the situation was before April 2020. But things like doing away with restrictions on Chinese investment, those are very difficult decisions and possibly may not be taken. How do you think India will develop its relationship with China going forward? Do you, as someone who watches China and India very closely, expect a complete reset in India-China ties?
That would be very difficult, a complete reset. I don't think you're going to get something that approaches a total normalization for all the reasons that you alluded to. So from Beijing's perspective, are they going to abandon their territorial claims? Of course not. Are they going to stop providing assistance to Islamabad? No, they're not. Are they going to abandon efforts to or plans to build a dam along the Brahmaputra River? No, they're not going to. Are they going to stop seeing India as some sort of long-term, very potent economic competitor, and one that they have concerns about talent leaving from China and building up industrial capacity in India? They're not going to stop viewing India as a potential competitor. So the question is really, things are moving in the right direction. Of course, the direction of travel is clear. There is still a lot of areas in which Beijing is willing to sort of do this give and take, where it's willing to maybe fudge a little bit on some things, but is it going to abandon its core interests? No, of course not. And that means that at the end of the day, you're moving forward with progress on the relationship, but to some extent, it's always papering over these pretty profound differences that are simply not going away anytime soon.
Right. My final question to you would be, when countries look at diversifying their supply chains, do you expect more investments to come into India, or you feel those investments into China remain intact?
I do see more investments going into India. That's very clear. Not necessarily because of anything that the Indian government itself is doing, but simply because a lot of investors, a lot of multinational companies, they see the tensions between the U.S. and China, and perhaps the Trump administration and Xi Jinping agree to a deal in the near future. That's entirely possible, but they see the long-term direction of travel, and it's clearly towards more geopolitical tension. And whatever disputes that the Trump administration may have with India at the moment, the perception within the business community is that in the long term, India is a far more geopolitically neutral player. And it is best if you are looking to expand and diversify your supply chains to try to look at expanding into India in particular. Obviously, economic growth is quite rapid, very promising along several dimensions in terms of the skill of the population, just the size of the population that could engage in manufacturing work. So to the extent that you look anywhere other than China, it's basically India. I mean, there's smaller players in Southeast Asia, but you're looking at India for the long haul. So I do think that definitely you will see more of a migration. It might be slow, but it will be a migration over time as supply chains start to shift from China into India and other countries as well.
All right. Thank you very much for joining us, Christopher Beder, giving us your view on the India-China relationship in the context of resumption of direct flights between the two countries.
Thank you for having me.